Part 2. Directions. In this part, you will hear 3 conversations. The conversations will not be repeated. There are 4 questions for each conversation. For each question, choose the right answer, A, B, C, or D. Then on the answer sheet, find the number of the question and fill in the space that corresponds to the letter of the answer you have chosen. Questions 9 to 12.
Listen to a discussion from a geography class.
First, you have some time to look at questions 9 to 12.
Today, we're going to talk about 2 lakes, the Great Salt Lake and Lake Bonneville. Most people are quite familiar with the Great Salt Lake, but not everyone is quite as familiar with Lake Bonneville. First of all, let's look at a map that shows both the Great Salt Lake and Lake Bonneville. Now, Gwen, what can you tell me about the Great Salt Lake and Lake Bonneville?
Lake Bonneville was a lake during prehistoric times. The Great Salt Lake is the largest surviving remnant of the prehistoric Lake Bonneville.
Yes, and how old is Lake Bonneville?
Lake Bonneville came into existence 1 million years ago.
And how big was it?
It was an enormous lake that covered about 20,000 square miles.
Gwen has explained that the Great Salt Lake is a small remnant of Lake Bonneville, and that Lake Bonneville was 20,000 square miles in size. Now, Nick, just how big is the Great Salt Lake?
The present Great Salt Lake is much bigger than Lake Bonneville was.
Are you sure? You want to try again?
Oops, did I get it backwards? What did I say? I mean, what I meant was that the Great Salt Lake is much smaller than Lake Bonneville. Lake Bonneville was much larger than the Great Salt Lake is today.
You got it this time. The Great Salt Lake is much smaller than Lake Bonneville, less than 10% of the size of Lake Bonneville, in fact. The Great Salt Lake covers about 1,700 square miles. This is a rather large lake today, and it's much bigger than the lake that preceded it. And there's another big difference between the 2 lakes, besides the size. It has to do with the water. Can you tell me how the water in the Great Salt Lake differs from the water in Lake Bonneville? Paul?
A big difference between Lake Bonneville and the Great Salt Lake is that Lake Bonneville was a freshwater lake, while the Great Salt Lake, as you can tell from its name, is a saltwater lake.
Exactly. Now, let's look at the reasons why this lake has become a saltwater lake and, in fact, has water that is much saltier than ocean water. And what is it that makes the Great Salt Lake so salty? Gwen?
What makes the Great Salt Lake so salty is that it has no outlet. 3 rivers feed into it: the Bear, the Weber, and the Jordan River. These rivers carry 1 million tons of minerals and salts into the Great Salt Lake each year.
And what about these 3 rivers, the Bear River, the Weber River, and the Jordan River? Nick?
These rivers all feed into the Great Salt Lake. They don't provide any outlet from the lake.
And how does this make the lake so salty? Paul?
Well, there's no way for these minerals and salts to exit from the lake because the lake has no outlet. The water that flows into the lake from these 3 rivers evaporates and leaves the salts.
And how much salt is there in the lake today?
Over the lifetime of the lake, 6 billion tons of salts have built up. This is why the Great Salt Lake has a much higher salt content than the oceans.
Excellent. You seem to understand the important points about the Great Salt Lake and Lake Bonneville. Now, let's move on to another topic.
What is the instructor trying to accomplish? When did Lake Bonneville come into existence? Is each of these not true according to the lecture? What is stated about the Weber, the Bear, and the Jordan rivers?
Questions 13 to 16.
Listen to a group of students who are taking a business class.
First, you have some time to look at questions 13 to 16.
Our presentation for marketing class is in a few days. Let's see what information we've come up with.
Okay. Our topic for the presentation is the marketing of Kleenex early in its history. We're supposed to show how the early marketing of Kleenex helped to turn it into such a successful product.
There seem to be three clear phases in the early history of Kleenex. First, its use during World War I. Second, its use as a substitute for face cloths during the 1920s. And third, its use as a substitute for handkerchiefs during the 1930s. For the presentation, how about if I talk about the first phase, the use of Kleenex during World War I?
And I'll talk about the second phase, its use as a substitute for face cloths.
And that leaves me with the third phase, the use of Kleenex as a substitute for handkerchiefs.
Now don't forget, we're talking about a marketing class, not a history class.
Yes, that's important to remember. Now, why don't we review the key points for each of these phases with an emphasis on the marketing of the product during each phase?
Sounds like a good idea to me.
So I'll go first. The first phase of the product was its use during World War I. Cotton was in short supply during the war, so the Kimberly-Clark Company developed Kleenex for use in bandages and gas masks. During this first phase, the company didn't need to worry about marketing the product. Because it was during a war, there was very high demand for the product.
Now for the second phase. After the war, after World War I, the company had a huge surplus of Kleenex, and it had to market the product. During the 1920s, Kimberly-Clark decided to market Kleenex as a high-end and glamorous substitute for face cloths. It used famous actresses in its marketing, and women who wanted to be glamorous, like the celebrities, used Kleenex in place of face cloths.
Now on to the second phase. Oh, sorry, that was the second phase. I'm going to be discussing the third phase. While Kimberly-Clark was marketing Kleenex only for use as a face cloth, a number of people began writing into the company, saying that there was another use for Kleenex besides its use as a face cloth. Kleenex was even more useful as a replacement for handkerchiefs. In 1930, the company's marketing department decided to conduct consumer testing to determine if the product should be presented as a face cloth or as a handkerchief. The results of the consumer testing showed that a large majority thought Kleenex was more useful as a handkerchief than as a face cloth.
Why are the students meeting? Listen again to part of the discussion. Then answer the question.
There seem to be three clear phases in the early history of Kleenex. First, its use during World War I. Second, its use as a substitute for face cloths during the 1920s. And third, its use as a substitute for handkerchiefs during the 1930s. For the presentation, how about if I talk about the first phase, the use of Kleenex during World War I?
And I'll talk about the second phase, its use as a substitute for face cloths.
And that leaves me with the third phase, the use of Kleenex as a substitute for handkerchiefs.
Now don't forget, we're talking about a marketing class, not a history class.
Why does the man say this?
Now don't forget, we're talking about a marketing class, not a history class.
What was the situation at Kimberly-Clark at the end of World War I? How did Kimberly-Clark learn that its product had a use as a handkerchief?
Questions 17 to 20.
Listen as a student consults with a university office worker.
First, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20.
Next in line, please. Yes, how can I help you?
I have a question about my grade record.
Your grade record? For which quarter?
For last quarter.
Grade reports for last quarter were mailed out a week ago. You should have received yours by now.
I received a grade report for last quarter. I just received it in the mail.
Well, then what's the problem?
I received a grade report in the mail, but the grades on it are wrong.
Oh, we don't handle that here. Here we only record the grades that the professors submit. If you have any questions about the grades you received, you should talk with your professors. That's not something we deal with here.
No, that's not what I mean. The problem is not that I received grades in the courses I took and the grades were lower than I expected. The problem is different from that. The problem is that I received grades in courses I didn't take and didn't receive grades in courses I did take.
And the grade report had your name on it?
It did.
You're saying that you received a grade report with your name on it, but that the courses listed on the grade report were courses you didn't take? That's really odd.
Look, here's my grade report. That's my name at the top, Anthony Taylor, and that's my address, 320 4th Avenue, Apartment B. But those aren't the courses I took.
That's your name and address on the grade report, but you didn't take the courses listed there?
No. This grade report lists a biology course, and I didn't take biology. And it lists calculus, and I most certainly did not take calculus. It also lists courses in English and track that I didn't take.
What courses did you take?
I took courses in history, drama, philosophy, and composition. None of those are listed there.
Well, this certainly isn't the correct grade report for you. Wait a minute. Let me look up something in my files on the computer. Okay. You said your name was Anthony Taylor?
Yes.
But what's your middle initial?
B. I'm Anthony B. Taylor.
And you took courses in history, drama, philosophy, and composition. Okay. I think I know what the problem is. We have 2 students here named Anthony Taylor.
Really? There's another Anthony Taylor?
Yes, but you're Anthony B. Taylor, and the other is Anthony M. Taylor. The courses listed for Anthony M. Taylor are history, drama, philosophy, and composition. These are the courses you took, and I think these must be your grades.
So you think the grades for the 2 Anthony Taylors are mixed up? I got his grade report, and he got mine?
Not exactly. I think his grades ended up on your grade report, and your grades ended up on his.
I see. So what happens now?
Let me check with your professors and make sure I have the correct information in the right places. Then I'll send out a new corrected grade report to you.
And when should I have it?
You probably won't have it for 2 weeks, because it may take that long to resolve the issue and then mail out new grade reports.
That's fine, as long as the problem gets solved.
It certainly will get solved.
Why does the student go to see the office worker? What is stated about the grade report the student received? What did the confusion turn out to be? What did the office worker promise to do?
That is the end of Part 2.